Alright, welcome back after a significant break to Monster Hunter World, into a video that I did not think I was going to end up making because I was kind of done with YouTube for at least a little while. But I suppose I have been sufficiently convinced to get back into it by the request of an acquaintance of mine. And so, here we are. We're back in Monster Hunter World to quite possibly my least favorite fight in the entire game. It's definitely up there. And for a lot of reasons, which I think will become quite apparent as I actually get into this. And that is Alatreon. So, like a lot of people, I was quite excited for Alatreon when he was initially announced back, I think, earlier this year. He came out, I believe, on July 1st, and I ended up doing him much later on. I was sort of on kind of off of Monster Hunter at the time, so I did him a lot later on, after a lot of the guides and a lot of the information had come out about him, which was definitely a good idea, as I don't think there's another monster in the entire series who basically forces you to play the meta, or what's traditionally good. Alatreon is the only monster I can think of who forces you to play like that, and that is only the beginning of his issues. So, the general concept behind Alatreon when he was introduced back in Monster Hunter 3, I think, was that he had the ability. He was a black dragon. He was one of the forbidden dragons, which means he was like a super duper endgame monster, and even in Iceborne he is. He had the ability to switch out to use all of the elements. So that was his original mechanic. He was like, okay, he can use all of the elements. However, in World, they made a lot of changes to him. He's been updated. He was already really hard, and they basically super buffed him. Like, they added a ton of mechanics. Just in the entire purpose of them was to make this fight as difficult as they possibly could. And they succeeded. They succeeded with flying colors. They also turned him into an absolute atrocity of a boss fight. So his first mechanic is his elemental switching. So, depending on the quest you do, there's 2 quests you can get him, as well as a special assignment, which is sort of just the story version of his quest. He will start either in fire mode or ice mode. After 3 minutes, he will switch to dragon mode. And after another 3 minutes, he will switch in dragon mode. He will switch either to the mode he did not start in. So if he started in ice mode, 3 minutes, dragon mode, 3 minutes, then fire mode. The exception to this is if you break his horns. He's got 2 horns, you can break them only in dragon mode. And if you break them, he will stay in whatever elemental mode he started in. So let's say he starts out in ice mode, you transition to dragon mode, you break one of his horns, he'll switch back to ice mode, and then he'll go back to dragon mode after another 3 minutes. Which is already another very annoying mechanic. A lot of items, because his elemental resistance has changed so much. So in fire mode, he's got a 3-star weakness to ice. Ice has a 3-star weakness to fire. Dragon mode has a 2-star weakness to dragon. And so he's pretty much constantly switching elemental resistances, which is already bad enough. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if not for quite possibly the one mechanic that dominates this entire fight, which is Eschaton Judgment. At the end of every dragon mode, which is about every 6 minutes, it can come off slightly earlier. I've seen it go off around 550, but the point is, about every 6 minutes, Alatreon will drop Eschaton Judgment. This is a supernova. It will kill you if you do not do enough elemental damage to him before that 6-minute timer hits. He will kill you. He just straight kills you. It is technically possible to survive it without doing enough elemental damage, but you basically have to have a perfect speedrun team, and good lord knows that most people in here could not pull it off. So, you have to deal enough elemental damage to him. The problem, again, this is where the problems start to come in. He is because of his elemental switching, there's no good ways to consistently deal elemental damage. The best consistency you can get is from dragon weapons, which maintain their consistency, which means you don't have to worry about breaking his horns. Of course, they also don't have quite the same damage. So what most groups will do is they'll bring either fire or ice weapons to counter that specific sort of element when he starts off, and then basically they'll just sort of hope they can do enough elemental damage to him to seal him off. It's called sealing his power. You'll see a message pop up on the right side of the screen that tells him, "Oh, you've sealed off his power." You can do it up to 4 times, although you'll be lucky to get 2, and each iteration will lower the damage of Eschaton Judgment, although you only need 1 to avoid dying from it. Although again, if you don't actually... it doesn't actually prevent the damage, it just lowers it to the point where you're just not dying from it. You can still die from it even if you do seal it off. So there you go. We're containing Alatreon's power. And we're going to go for the head here. Another big problem is that different parts of his body take different levels of elemental damage. The head and the forelegs are the best for doing damage, and everywhere else is kind of... So yeah, there he goes. He's switching to dragon. So this is where I'll be doing the most elemental damage. And someone's already died. 2 or 3 feints isn't usually uncommon for an Alatreon run. He's pretty good at killing people. And this is a relatively short fight. This fight lasts, I believe, about 14 minutes, and that's relatively short for Monster Hunter. I've seen even really good groups to be able to get him down even faster than that. I've been in good groups that have gotten him down even faster than that, but usually for each fight you can usually expect there to be 1 to 2 Eschaton Judgments. But really, that's his big problems. He has a bunch of other less noticeable problems unless you fight him a ton. The first is that he's pretty much the game's foremost AoE spammer. There have been other AoE spammy monsters. Lunastra and Raging Brachydios are probably the 2 other examples that come to mind immediately, but Alatreon puts them all to shame. About 90% of his attacks are AoE spams, and because literally the only weapon that really deals with that well is the Insect-Glaive, which is what I main, it can become very annoying very quickly, as a lot of players if you don't main the Insect-Glaive, you're going to spend a lot of your time running around trying to dodge all of his stupid AoE, because he just loves to drop that all over the place. So, if you look at this, his ice crystals, he can hit those with lightning bolts and make them explode, by the way, which is really nice. There's oil on the ground, which he can set on fire for more AoE. And, of course, he's constantly just spamming out lightning bolts. Yeah, see? And there's 2 more things that make this fight even more atrocious. Well, 3. The first is that he has some very interesting hitboxes. A lot of his elemental attacks are not... It's difficult to tell where the hitbox actually is supposed to be, which can lead to some interesting things happening. I forgot one of the things I was going to say, but I know the first thing I was going to say is that you cannot use Farcasters during this fight, which is another one of those... If you don't understand Monster Hunter, you won't understand why this is such a problem, so I suppose I should explain it. Farcasters allow you to return to camp, which allows you to change your weapons, which means you cannot adjust to the fact that he's changing elements. You have to pick a weapon and stick with it, basically. Normally you can go back to replenish potions and stuff, but for this one specific fight, they decided that that wasn't going to be a thing, and so it's not a thing. There's a lot more problems, I suppose. I'm going to have a lot of material. Because he can use all the elements, that means he can inflict all of the elemental blights. So that's Fire Blight, which is damage over time, Thunder Blight, which makes stun easier to happen, Water and Ice Blight, which both effectively do the same thing, but they lower your stamina, which is a big problem for trying to dodge things. Here's Eschaton Judgment. So the best way is just to drop a health booster, or have someone will drop a health booster usually, and then you just wait it out. So yeah, that was with one seal, and it still takes half of our damage, even with the health booster constantly healing us. So you're pretty much required to burst heal through it. Otherwise, there's no way you're gonna survive it. It's guaranteed damage is never fun. He has a lot of guaranteed damage. What's the other big thing? And the last elemental blight, right? So the last one is Dragon Blight. Dragon Blight's by far the worst one you can get because it reduces your elemental damage. So that's another big one you have to think about. And usually I just build for Blight resistance, which deals with all of them at the same time. Better than just trying to deal with any one particular Blight. So, fun again. And the other thing is he just does it a lot of damage. Like, you'll notice a lot of his attacks will take me from full health to half health pretty much immediately. And the armor set I'm wearing, which is actually his armor set, the Escadora set, actually has insane defenses. Like, it has resistances to pretty much all of the elements, as well as really high armor values, and he's still tanking through it no problem. Actually, what Cookie Days is doing there is reminding me of another big problem. The Clutch Claw counter, or the flinch shot. I've called it both things. I seem to switch every day, but whatever. Which is a way to essentially get a free knockdown. Unfortunately, there's only like 4 places you can actually knock him down, or basically just flinch shot him into the wall. The only other way to do it is when he's flying and not in rage. When he's in rage, you can't ever get a flinch shot off. And that basically means it's really hard to knock him down, which is what you need to do to try and break his horns, which are usually necessary because people will be running either fire or ice weapons, which you need to try and steal away his power. Fortunately, he does go down when you do steal away his power, so I suppose there's that, although given how infrequently it happens, it's not exactly a great replacement. Why does this make him a bad fight, though? Because it restricts your freedom a lot. Eschaton Judgment means that about, I'd say a good 60 to 70% of the endgame weapons you require to beat him are not viable for his fight. All of the weapons that don't do elemental damage, forget about using those. You want to use those, you're basically signing your own death warrant. Unless you think you can... unless you're willing to just, which some people are, just willing to try and take the loss, essentially feint on purpose to get through his fight. Which, again, some people do. There are a lot of builds out there which basically rely on essentially just feinting on purpose to try and get through him. The other thing is his ridiculous health. He's got, even at base form, he has like 50,000 health. With 3 people, I think it's up to like 100 something. I think with 4 people, it's up to something like, it's close to 200,000. Well, I know it's above 100,000. I don't know how big it is, but he's got a lot of health. Which doesn't seem to matter much because he does seem to go down pretty quickly. So, for what that's worth. But just due to how his fight works, he restricts your freedom a lot, and couple that with the AoE spam, the insane damage, trying to deal with Eschaton Judgment, trying to deal with all the elemental blights, trying to deal with the fact that his arena is incredibly restrictive in terms of what weapons you can bring, and healing. He's not really that fun, and it's really mainly due to Eschaton Judgment and the Forecaster restriction. You can't adapt to his fight. You pretty much just gotta sit there and take it, and I don't think I've ever made it through a single one of his hunts without someone dying. Even when I'm in with like MR 500 people, someone dies to Alatreon, pretty much without fail. Couple that with that, he's also incredibly mobile as well. He darts around, he flies, he dashes everywhere, which means it's really hard to get him into a nice spot to try and deal some consistent damage to him. So, I mean, This is a fight that I desperately wanted to like, because he's an incredibly cool monster. I love his design, I love his concept. I think his fight is probably one of the most visually stunning in the entire game, just because of how much elemental stuff is going off. But it's completely ruined by just garbage mechanic after garbage mechanic. Everything from judgment to the elemental switching to the AoE spam to the absurd damage. And we're actually, a lot of people here are actually using post-Alatreon materials, so imagine how awful this fight is for people who don't have access to that. I would know because I had to get here, and let's just say it involved about 10 to 12 runs that died because people just couldn't not get murdered by him. And that's not even counting the, like, 6 or 7 solo runs I tried of him before realizing that that was basically a dead end. Like, good luck beating this guy solo. It's nearly impossible. Without feigning, at least. His dragon... One thing he fortunately did not do is his Dragon Nova, or his Air Dragon Nova, which is... He'll charge it up and then dart over to a player and set it off, and it's basically, if you're not pretty much full health, or if you don't Superman dive, it's basically a one-hit kill. So, him being able to just decide to one-shot someone is also really cool, I guess. I don't know what they were thinking with this fight. I'm thinking... Because a similar thing happened with Rajang. Rajang wasn't an atrocious monster, but then when World came around and all of the veterans were like, oh, Rajang, it's an insane fight. The World guys, the team behind it, I guess, was like, oh, I guess we gotta make him a really hard fight. These people don't look like idiots, so they just added in a ton of mechanic to make him insanely hard, and my guess is that's what happened with Alatreon. People were like, oh my gosh, Alatreon, he's so insanely difficult. You won't believe how hard this fight's gonna be in the World. And the team was like, okay, I guess we gotta make him, like, the hardest thing ever. And so they shoved in, like, 5 extra mechanics just to make the fight harder. And look what happened. It's probably the most I'm not sure if it's the most hated fight in the game, but it's definitely in the top 3. And that's a list that includes Master Rank Lunastra and Kushala Daora, both of which are absolutely awful. So, I'm not sure if he's... Again, I'm not sure if I would absolutely call him the worst fight in the game, but he's damn close. He's definitely the hardest. Well, I haven't fought Fatalis yet, but I'll make that judgment when I get there. Fatalis might be an entirely different beast. He might require another video. Another rage video. Let's say that much. Well, Alatreon. Great concept, horrible execution. So that's all I gotta say. I know my boss fight experience is somewhat limited, but he's on the list. He's on my worst boss fights ever list at number 1. Because, good lord, I'm never doing him again. Not unless I have to.